In the quiet, affluent suburbs of Oakland County, Michigan, the winter of 1976 ushered in a period of unprecedented terror that would forever alter the community's sense of security. Between February 1976 and March 1977, a predator, or perhaps a group of predators, began abducting and murdering children in crimes so methodical and chilling they would become known as the Oakland County Child Killer Case. This string of slayings targeted young, vulnerable victims, holding them captive for days before their bodies were left in plain sight. A brazen taunt to law enforcement and a horrifying message to the public. The case remains one of the most haunting and complex unsolved serial murder investigations in American history, a dark chapter that still demands answers nearly 5 decades later. The name itself, the Oakland County Child Killer, or simply OCCK, still evokes a palpable sense of dread. The killer's methods were disturbingly consistent, suggesting a practiced, organized offender. Each child was held for a significant period, meticulously cared for, fed, bathed, and sometimes even clothed in freshly laundered garments before being murdered. This paradoxical mix of nurturing and violence baffled investigators and shaped a profile of a complex, dangerous individual. The precision of the crimes and the public placement of the victims' bodies pointed to a killer who was confident, patient, deriving deep psychological satisfaction from the terror inflicted across the region. Fear gripped Oakland County like never before. Children once walked to school alone, played in parks until dusk, and moved freely through neighborhoods. The OCCK shattered that innocence. Parents began to see danger in every unfamiliar car. Children were told never to speak to strangers. The abductions turned suburbia into a geography of fear. Playgrounds fell silent, streets emptied. A collective anxiety settled over the community. Parents waited and worried, hoping their child would not be next. From a street corner or a local shopping center. Decades have passed since the last known victim was found, yet the case has never truly gone cold. It has simply remained unsolved. The lack of resolution left an open wound for victims' families and the community. The investigation, once the largest of its kind in U.S. history, has been reopened and re-examined multiple times. The reign of terror began with 12-year-old Mark Stebbins. On February 15, 1976, Mark left his mother's American Legion Hall in Ferndale, intending to go home to watch television. He never arrived. His disappearance sparked a frantic search, but it was 4 days later when his small body was discovered in a snowbank in a Southfield office park. Mark had been bound and sexually assaulted with an object. An autopsy revealed he had been suffocated. The killer had held him for several days, a fact confirmed by the contents of his stomach. The placement of his body was deliberate and visible, almost ceremonial, setting a terrifying precedent for the crimes that would follow. It was the first chilling signature of a predator who was just beginning to reveal their monstrous pattern. Nearly 10 months passed before the killer struck again, deepening the community's dread. On December 22, 1976, 12-year-old Jill Robinson disappeared after a shopping trip at a hobby store in Royal Oak. She had argued with her mother and stormed out. Her body was found 4 days later on the side of Interstate 75 in Troy, again placed in a snowbank where it would be easily seen. Like Mark, she had been held captive and was killed by a single shotgun blast to the face. The brutality of her murder was a shocking escalation, yet the underlying ritual of care remained. She was fully clothed when found, her body carefully positioned for discovery by a passing motorist. The new year brought no relief. On January 2, 1977, just a week after Jill Robinson's body was found, 10-year-old Christine Mihelic vanished from a local convenience store in Berkeley. She had gone to buy a magazine. For an agonizing 19 days, her family and the community waited, hoping against hope for her safe return. Their hopes were shattered on January 21st, when her frozen body was found on a rural roadside in Franklin Village. Christine had been held the longest of all the victims. She had been smothered and her body was neatly dressed in clean clothes, positioned on the snow as if she were sleeping. The killer's pattern was now undeniable. Abduction, captivity with care, a public final resting place. The final known victim was 11-year-old Timothy King. On March 16, 1977, Timothy left his home in Birmingham to go to a nearby drugstore to buy a bag of candy, borrowing money from his older sister. He was last seen at the store, but he never made it home. His disappearance triggered a massive public plea, with his father, Barry, making an emotional appeal on television, begging the killer to send our son home. 6 days later, Timothy's body was found in a shallow ditch in Livonia, just outside Oakland County. He had been sexually assaulted, suffocated, and, in a final act of cruelty, his favorite meal of Kentucky Fried Chicken had been fed to him shortly before his death. His body, like the others, was carefully cleaned and dressed before being abandoned. With Timothy's murder, the killing spree abruptly stopped, leaving 4 families destroyed and a region haunted by a phantom. The chilling sequence of events began on a cold winter day. On February 15, 1976, Mark Stebbins, 12, disappeared in Ferndale. This marked the start of a year-long period of terror for the residents of Oakland County. 4 days later, on February 19, 1976, his body was discovered in a Southfield snowbank. Investigators treated it as a homicide, but had not yet recognized a serial pattern. The quiet that followed was a deceptive calm, a long pause before the storm returned. The predator remained dormant for the spring, summer, and fall, but re-emerged as winter approached again. On December 22, 1976, Jill Robinson, 12, vanished from Royal Oak after leaving a local hobby store. The timing, just before Christmas, amplified horror. On December 26, 1976, her body was found alongside Interstate 75 in Troy. The new year began with another tragedy. On January 2, 1977, Christine Mihalik, 10, was abducted from a Berkeley convenience store. Panic surged. Parents held children close. Streets grew quiet. Christine was held 19 days. Found January 21st in Franklin Village. The final act occurred in March. On March 16, 1977, Timothy King, 11, disappeared. On March 22nd, Timothy's body was found in Livonia. The killing spree ended, but the investigation stretched on for decades. In response to the escalating terror, law enforcement launched what was, at the time, the largest and most intensive criminal investigation in United States history. A multi-jurisdictional task force formed. Local police departments, the Michigan State Police, the Federal Bureau of Investigation. The scale was staggering. Over 200 officers worked around the clock, chasing leads and piecing together the puzzle. Public pressure mounted as an exceptionally cunning offender operated with impunity. The task force processed approximately 18,000 tips, from suspicious vehicles to unsettling neighbors. Each lead had to be documented, prioritized, and investigated. A logistical nightmare that threatened to overwhelm. Investigators interviewed hundreds of known sex offenders and persons of interest, building vast databases before computerized analysis. After the task force disbanded in 1978, MSP kept the case active. Evidence was re-examined with new tools, witnesses re-interviewed, case files filling rooms. Despite persistence, challenges plagued the probe. Jurisdictional breakdowns, pre-DNA reliance on statements and sketches, and no arrest, leaving decades of frustration and second-guessing. Section 5. Strands of Evidence. The Forensic Puzzle of the OCCK. The forensic investigation was groundbreaking and frustratingly inconclusive. One significant piece emerged years later. Hairs found on Christine Mihalik and Timothy King were consistent with each other. Further analysis later connected those hairs to a third victim, Jill Robinson. A breakthrough came via a different case, Arch Sloan. Police searched his 1966 Pontiac Bonneville, collecting hair and fiber samples. Years later, scientists compared those samples. 2 hairs on Christine matched hairs found in Sloan's car. That linked the vehicle, not necessarily Sloan. DNA testing showed mitochondrial links that did not match Sloan or Chris Bush, but an unknown male profile. It proved another, unidentified individual had been in an environment shared by at least one victim, a tantalizing unresolved clue. Witnesses reported a blue AMC gremlin near disappearance and recovery sites. Investigators probed owners but found no concrete suspect. Like the microscopic hairs and the anonymous DNA, the blue gremlin remains a piece of the puzzle investigators can't place. Section 6. Shadows of Suspicion, Persons of Interest and Lingering Controversies. Over the decades, none more prominent than Christopher Bush, a convicted pedophile, son of a wealthy General Motors executive. He lived near victims, fit the profile, drove a similar car, and had access to multiple vehicles. After failing a polygraph about the murders, he committed suicide in 1978 as investigators closed in. Many believed Bush was the killer. Some saw his death as tacit admission, effectively closing the primary line of inquiry. But the case against Bush was far from definitive, sparking accusations of premature conclusions. Persistent controversy alleges a cover-up to protect powerful individuals. Some family members and independent investigators alleged Bush did not act alone, but as part of a larger, well-connected pedophile ring. Theories suggest influential community figures may have been involved, and law enforcement complicit or intimidated. Though never proven, these claims fueled decades of distrust and speculation. Hairs found on victims did not match Bush, but linked children to a car owned by Bush associate Arch Sloan, suggesting at least one other person was involved. Some pointed to a confession letter allegedly written by Bush that later disappeared. Officials called it irrelevant, but its absence fed theories it named others. Other suspects like John Wayne Gacy and Ted Bundy were considered, with no links found. Attention repeatedly returned to Bush, Gregory Green, and Arch Sloan. Family claims kept alternate theories alive. The most straightforward theory posits a single, organized serial killer. Proponents point to consistent victimology, all prepubescent children abducted in public places, and a similar modus operandi. Each child was held for several days, cared for, murdered through asphyxiation or a single gunshot, and then left in a visible location. This behavioral consistency suggests one script, one individual honing his craft. Suspects like Christopher Bush fit this profile, a lone predator with means and motive. The weakness, forensic evidence, multiple unknown profiles, suggesting others were involved. A more sinister theory posits an organized pedophile ring that exploited and then silenced children. Lengths of captivity and well-fed clues could indicate a shared location with multiple access. The main argument against keeping such a conspiracy secret for decades would require impossible silence. A hybrid theory proposes a primary killer with one or more accomplices, explaining forensic links like hairs in Arch Sloan's car that did not belong to him. A less common theory suggests a copycat after Mark Stebbins. The 10-month gap lends plausibility, but linked forensic evidence across 3 victims makes this unlikely unless associates overlapped from the start. The impact on the victims' families has been a lifelong sentence of grief, frustration, and unanswered questions. For the parents and siblings, Mark Stebbins, Jill Robinson, Christine Mihelic, Timothy King, time has not healed the wound. Instead, lack of justice compounded it. Barry King became the public face of anguish, his televised plea forever etched in memory. Families became outspoken critics, channeling pain into a relentless pursuit of truth that often put them at odds with authorities. Many voiced accusations of incompetence and even corruption, believing police prematurely focused on Bush, ignoring evidence of wider conspiracy. The King family hired private detectives and lawyers to pursue ignored leads, deepening a lasting rift that complicates cooperation. Trauma seeped into the community. The OCCK case marked the end of an era of innocence for southeastern Michigan. A new vigilance took root. Stranger danger, safety protocols, a cautionary tale passed down so the vulnerability of that time would not be forgotten. Siblings navigated a world made unsafe, burdened by media attention and shared grief, fighting for answers and their own peace. As of today, October 15, 2025, the Oakland County child killer case officially remains an active, open, unsolved investigation. Held by the Michigan State Police, detectives continue to manage voluminous files. Activity has slowed, but it has never gathered dust. It remains a priority. MSP periodically reviews the case, applying new forensic techniques to preserve 1970s evidence. Advances in DNA, especially genetic genealogy, offer the most promising path to identifying the unknown male linked to victims. The MSP encourages any information, no matter how small. They maintain a tip line and email. A forgotten memory or crisis of conscience could be the missing piece. For information on Mark Stebbins, Jill Robinson, Christine Mihelic, Timothy King, contact the MSP 1st District Headquarters or submit via the MSP website's cold case forms. The investigation remains in suspended animation, caught between a tragic past and an uncertain future. Each DNA test or review brings a flicker of hope, followed by familiar ache when it leads nowhere. The enduring mystery reminds us justice is not always swift or certain. Until an arrest is made, the case testifies to grief's patience, law enforcement's persistence, and the chilling reality that a killer, or killers, may have died unpunished. The most profound legacy of the Oakland County child killer is the permanent transformation of community safety and childhood itself. Before 1976, freedom that seems unimaginable today. The murders dismantled this culture of trust. The case catalyzed a nationwide shift, popularizing stranger danger and institutionalizing new safety rules. The days of unlocked doors and unsupervised play were over. The monster under the bed felt real, and possibly waiting down the street. The memory of the 4 victims is actively kept alive, not just by families, but by a community that refuses to forget. Memorials and renewed coverage re-educate the public and ensure the children are remembered as more than victims. This enduring memory defies the killer's erasure, keeping stories alive and justice in motion. The case reshaped practice, centralized task forces, better information sharing, modern evidence preservation, and FBI profiling advances. Ultimately, its legacy is vigilance, a cautionary tale woven into local identity, a promise to protect the vulnerable, and to never forget the lessons of that unspeakable winter.